Hey, seventh graders. This is a video that will walk you through how to select an appropriate data display. So you will be given several different situations, and we're going to talk about which type of graph or plot is appropriate to display that information. The first type of information we are going to look at, and for selecting a graph, is when we have numerical, which is numbers, or non-numerical, which is anything that's not numbers. When we have numbers or non-numbers types of data to display in categories, the most appropriate display is. So anytime we're displaying information in categories, those are key words. Anytime we're putting things in categories, we are going to be looking for a bar graph. So bar graphs are used to display numerical and non-numerical data. So if we have a look at the example that we have a bar graph of our favorite sports. Each bar represents a different category. So the first bar represents soccer, then we have softball, basketball, and other. So we have our categories as the different sports and the number of students for each sport. Our next type of data that we are going to display, when we want to show data for a very large set of data, so if we have a large set, it means a lot of numbers, or when we want to show variation, how our data is changing from kind of the smallest to the largest, then we are going to use the following type of display. And that display would be a box plot. We're going to use this box plot to show our large amounts of data and to show the variation. How much is it different from our lower to our higher pieces of data? So remember, with a box plot, we need to identify each one of these pieces. Our lower extreme is the smallest number in our set of data. The upper extreme is our highest set of data. The median is going to be inside your box. It might be exactly in the middle, might be closer to the left, it might be closer to the right. Okay, the lower quartile, remember, is the median of the lower half of data, and the upper quartile is the median of the upper half of data. So remember, it breaks it into 4 quartiles. So we have from lower extreme to lower quartile as Q1. Q2 is lower quartile to median. Median to upper quartile is Q3. And Q4 is upper quartile to upper extreme. So let's have a look at our next type of data to display. The next type of data that we are looking at is when we want to show data that's broken into parts or show percents. So some keywords: broken into parts or percents. So anytime that we are looking at breaking it into parts or showing percents, we are going to be using a circle graph. So a circle graph will show us the information broken into parts. Remember that each one of these percents, when we add them together, will always total 100%. So all of these sections should always equal 100% in a circle graph. And there's various types of questions you can answer based off of a circle graph. But anytime we break it into parts or show percents, we need that circle graph. So let's look at our next example. For this one, when we want to show data that displays the frequency of data that's divided into equal intervals or ranges. So that gives us some clues right there. Frequency talks about how often that data occurs. And when we talk about divided into intervals or ranges, that means we're not looking at just one number, we're looking at a group of numbers together. So when we are looking for frequency or data divided into equal intervals or ranges, we are going to be looking at a histogram. Histograms are very much like bar graphs, except for one major difference. With the histogram, you'll notice that we have a range of numbers down at the bottom. So this one goes from 0 to 30, then 31 to 60, 61 to 90, 91 to 120, and 121 to 150. So we have our data that's displayed in a range. And it still tells us how many that we have going up on our y-axis. So it is just kind of a fancy bar graph. But the key being each bar represents a range of data and not just one number or not just one category. Our next type of graph that we're going to look at is when we want to show data that changes over time. So the change over time is our key word. Time could be minutes, seconds, hours, days, weeks, months, years, any amount of time. That means we are going to be using a line graph to show that information. Line graphs always show change over time. So if we look at this information, this one is talking about Lisa's collection. And we have a double line graph because we have two lines going at one time. Our increment of time is in months. And it's talking about the number of books. So we have music CDs and books that we have here. So we are displaying a change over time for a line graph. For our next type, we are going to show data that shows the frequency of the data using a number line. So frequency, remember, is how often that data occurs, and the other keyword in this is number line. So anytime we're using a number line to show how often that data occurs, we are going to be using a dot plot. Remember that dot plots, we make our number line across the bottom, and then each one of our dots represents how frequent that number. So this dot plot shows the number of family members. So we have one person that has one family member, two people that have two family members, three people have three family members, four people have four family members, three people have five family members, one person has 7 family members, and one person has 9 family members. So we have our number line at the bottom, and our dots represent each time that piece of data occurs. When you are trying to decide what kind of data to use to display your information, or what type of display to use to display your data, there's 3 questions that you need to consider. 1, what type of information is given? Okay, are they giving you days? Are they giving you category information? Are they giving you a range of information? What type of data are they giving you? The second thing that you need to consider is, what do you want the display to show? So what are we trying to display, and how are we trying to display that data? Okay, are we trying to see it broken into sections? Or that would be a circle graph. Okay, if we're trying to show some range of data, we're going to use a histogram. The third thing that we need to question is, how will the display be analyzed? So what is our purpose? What are we trying to show? And what kind of questions are we going to be able to answer from how our graph is being displayed? So those are 3 important questions that will help you figure out what kind of data display you need for your information. So now we're going to do a little bit of practice. So it says, select an appropriate display to show the number of boys of different age ranges that participate in athletics. So we have what we're going to talk about. We're displaying different age ranges. So that gives us a little bit of a clue. Okay, and we're going to show the number of boys that participate in different types of athletics. So when we are talking about a different age range, we are talking about using a histogram. So since the display will show an interval, a histogram, like the one below, would be an appropriate display to represent the data. So we have boys' participation in athletics. We have their age range, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, and 15 to 19. Okay? So that gives us a little information, and it tells us the number of boys who participate at that age. So since we were talking about a range, remember a range and an interval are the same thing. So a histogram, which is just a fancy bar graph, is appropriate. For example number 2, it says select an appropriate type of display to compare the percent of ethanol production by state. Justify your reasoning. Then construct the display. We're not going to focus on constructing the display, but notice there's major keywords here, and that keyword is percent. So anytime that we are talking about percent, we are going to be displaying our data using a circle graph. So if we were to take this data here, we would create a circle graph because we're making a part-to-part comparison and we're using percent. So here is the percentage from our table up here at the top. Our circle graph would look something very similar to this. So we have an overview of how to select the appropriate display for the different types of data that we have. So you will be doing some practice with this. Good luck.